So this is a glass of white wine. Not a carafe of white wine, a glass of white wine. But I'm drinking it for Papa. It's the 25th of November today, so it's Mom's birthday. It's also Srividensi Day, so Independence of Suriname. But it's a special day, and I'm in the family space. And it was also the last performance of this opera, Anansi, the stories of the world, bevrijde. And so it's an opera that I wrote. And I thought it would be appropriate, because it was the last day, to start what I have to say with the opera. Anansi, for those who don't know, is a spider. Surinamese fables about a spider, a trickster spider. And actually I know the Anansi stories through my mother, because she told those stories. My grandfather told those stories. And in unboxing the archives, we found a letter from my aunt in the early 70s, like 1970, 1969, where she references my mother's ambitions to actually collect these folk tales and write them and put them in a book. We found this not so long ago, so I didn't know this when I started writing this opera. But somebody asked me 2 weeks ago for who I wrote the opera, and I started saying a whole complicated thing about audiences and stories being important, that they're shared, and all these things are true. But I realized that probably I wrote it for my mother in the first place. So it's about Anansi versus the tiger. And the tiger represents, I guess, the master, the white man, the West, all these things in these Anansi stories. And in this story, the tiger keeps all the stories of the world locked away in his palace and decides which stories are worthwhile and which stories aren't. And he's introduced. He comes when his first appearance on stage starts. He says, "A story is just a story. I keep them like birds in a cage. A story is just a story." But he says, and I'll sing it in Dutch first because it's sung in Dutch, and I'm not a good singer. But maar wetenschap, mijn wetenschap is waarheid. Er zijn zoveel verhalen, maar er is maar één waarheid. En die is van mij. So science, my science is truth. There are many, many stories, but there's only one truth, and that's my truth. That's how Tigri introduces himself. And Papa was very much somebody about truth. So at a first glance you could think, okay, so is Tigri like your father? And but no, there's a very, very important difference. My father was absolute about science and absolute about things that he thought weren't relevant or weren't to the point. He was absolute about dismissing them. But Tigri says, wetenschap, mijn wetenschap is waarheid. Science, my science is truth. And he says my science, so he claims science to be his own. And this is the major difference between Tigri and my father, or our father. All the boxes next door that we've been unboxing testify to how, yes, he felt science was truth. And he also felt that the truth is what sets people free. But he also felt that the truth, and therefore science, did not belong to anyone. And everything in these boxes testifies to that. Even the way he behaved when he worked for big oil, and was finding all this scientific data, which he thought were really important to be shared by the world. And the oil companies, of course, would say, no, no, that's private company, confidential data. And my father would lobby to get that data. Or when he was working in oil, he would lobby to get that data out. When he came to the Netherlands and became a professor at the university, he actually knowingly, completely ignored the relationships between the different universities in terms of the rivalries, etc., because his idea was, we're all working for the same thing. We're all doing science, and science belongs to everybody, so we should share it. All of us should share all of that information. The way he worked with his students, an idea is an idea. It's science, and he would share his ideas. He wouldn't claim ideas. He wouldn't force students to add his name to papers that they wrote. He was about, and this also ties into the kind of work which the things that are coming out of the boxes, the stuff that he kept, because these boxes are but a small part of his whole archive. He already disposed of a lot of his archive, but he kept certain things, and they relate to the work he did with a time scale. But this is the same type of work. He would say, okay, so there's a seismic time scale for geological time. There's a carbon-14 time scale for geological time. There's a relative time scale for geological time. Every isotope time scale, all these different time scales. And he said, okay, but actually we should connect all the time scales so that if you're talking in one time scale, you can talk in the other time scale. In other words, it's a way of opening up the conversation about subjects which would otherwise be restrained to a stratigrapher who knows the geological time scale, but a chemist is involved with the carbon-14 time scale. But so this idea essentially pushed everything that he did. And I think that really starts with before science. When he was a young boy, he wanted to become a missionary, and he wanted to elevate the world by preaching the Word of God. And he lost his faith when he lost his father. Didn't understand why that happened, how that happened. Not something he discussed with us an awful lot, but he just said that clearly it was all a lie. And then he found science. Science. But not his science, our science. For him, science is part of the stories of the world. So it all sort of ties both my mother and my father to each other, as well as unknowingly, I guess, the stuff that I do is imbued with his ideas about ownership, about truth, and about sharing. And that's what I wanted to tell.